Today, I want to talk about a truth that is rarely discussed honestly, a truth that sits at the crossroads of psychology and human pain, drawing from the clarity and depth often shared by Dr. Ramani and delivered with a grounded, straight to the heart motivational tone. This is about what really happens when a narcissist finally realizes they have lost someone who truly loved them. Not someone who admired them, not someone who feared them, but someone who loved them with sincerity, patience, and emotional investment. For a long time, narcissists believe love is guaranteed, replaceable, and endlessly available. They confuse loyalty with weakness and compassion with control. But there comes a moment when the silence becomes permanent, when the supply does not return, and when the person who once poured love into them chooses self-respect instead. That moment changes something deep inside them, not always in healthy ways, but in revealing ones. This speech is not about glorifying their pain or hoping for their transformation. It is about understanding the shift, so you can stop doubting yourself, stop romanticizing the past, and finally see your worth clearly. Because when someone loses genuine love, the real lesson is not about them changing. It is about you realizing you were never replaceable. When control turns into regret, the moment they realize love is gone forever in your life, there comes a defining shift when you stop confusing intensity with intimacy and control with connection. For a long time, you may have believed that love could survive anything, that patience could soften sharp edges, that understanding could heal disregard. You tried harder, explained more, stayed longer. You offered empathy where accountability was required. What you did not realize then was that control thrives on access, and once access is gone, the illusion collapses. For someone who relies on dominance and entitlement, control feels like safety. It reassures their fragile sense of self. They test boundaries, withdraw affection, provoke reactions, and rewrite narratives because power gives them certainty. But power has a shelf life. It only exists while someone stays engaged. The moment you choose distance, clarity, and self-respect, the dynamic changes. Silence becomes unfamiliar. Your absence removes the stage they once commanded, and in that quiet, something uncomfortable surfaces. Regret does not arrive as remorse. It arrives as shock. They realize that love was not an infinite resource, that devotion was not guaranteed, and that the person they dismissed was actually the stabilizing force in their world. The control they once wielded no longer works because the audience has left. What replaces it is not growth, but reckoning. They feel exposed to consequences they avoided for years. In your life, this realization matters because it frees you from the myth that you were not enough. The truth is simpler and more empowering. You are too real for a dynamic built on control. Genuine love requires reciprocity, accountability, and humility. When those are absent, love becomes labor. And when you stop laboring, the system fails. As the distance becomes permanent, regret sharpens. They replay moments where empathy was dismissed, kindness was exploited, and care was taken for granted. They recognize, often too late, that real love does not perform, threaten, or chase. It shows up consistently, it listens, it respects limits. Losing that is not just losing a person, it is losing regulation, reflection, and a mirror that once softened their edges. For you, this is the turning point. You no longer wait for validation from someone who needed control more than connection. You understand that walking away was not abandonment, it was preservation. You reclaim your nervous system, your clarity, your time. You see that love should expand you, not diminish you. When control turns into regret, the lesson is not about their pain, it is about your power. You learn that choosing yourself ends cycles, that explanations never could. You recognize that peace is not passive, it is intentional. And you move forward knowing that the love you gave was real, and the strength it took to leave was even greater *** from ego to emptiness. What happens when manipulation no longer works *** in your life? There comes a moment when you realize that what once felt confusing was actually strategic. The mixed signals, the sudden affection followed by distance, the subtle guilt, the shifting blame, all of it was designed to keep you engaged, uncertain, and trying. Manipulation feeds the ego of someone who needs control to feel whole. As long as you questioned yourself, their sense of importance stayed intact, but the day you stop responding the same way, everything begins to unravel. Ego depends on reaction. It thrives on emotional supply, attention, reassurance, conflict, even your pain. When manipulation works, the ego feels powerful and affirmed. But when you grow aware, when you pause instead of chasing, when you stop explaining your worth, the structure collapses. The tactics lose effectiveness. The words no longer hook you. The silence no longer scares you. And that is when ego has nothing left to stand on. What replaces it is emptiness, not the quiet peace that comes with healing, but a hollow absence of validation. Without your reactions, they are left alone with themselves. The charm feels forced. The confidence feels brittle. They may escalate, provoke, or attempt to rewrite history, not because they are strong, but because they are desperate to restore the old dynamic. Manipulation stops working when awareness enters the room. In your life, this shift is profound because it changes how you see yourself. You begin to understand that you are not difficult, too sensitive, or demanding. You are simply responding to emotional inconsistency. When you step out of that cycle, you reclaim your clarity. You stop measuring your worth by how hard you can try. You stop mistaking chaos for connection. Emptiness is what remains when ego can no longer borrow identity from others. Without admiration, control, or emotional reactions, there is nothing to inflate the self-image. This is not a moment of transformation for them, but it is a moment of truth. And truth is uncomfortable when it cannot be manipulated away. For you, this is where strength takes root. You realize that your power was never in fixing them, but in choosing yourself. You learn that boundaries are not punishments, they are protections. You stop engaging in arguments that go nowhere and investing energy where there is no reciprocity. Your nervous system begins to settle. Your sense of self becomes steady. From ego to emptiness is not their story to heal. It is your story to reclaim. When manipulation no longer works, freedom does. You move forward grounded, self-trusting, and emotionally intact, knowing that awareness broke the spell and self-respect kept you free ***, losing the one who loved them purely. A wake-up call too late *** in your life. There is a quiet but powerful moment when you realize that pure love is rare, and not everyone knows how to hold it. You gave without calculation. You showed patience where there was inconsistency, understanding where there was harm, and hope where there was very little evidence to support it. You believed that love, when offered sincerely, could inspire change. What you did not see at first was that purity of love can be invisible to someone who is consumed by entitlement and self-focus. Pure love does not demand, manipulate, or compete. It offers safety, emotional presence, and genuine care. But to someone driven by control, that kind of love feels ordinary, predictable, even expendable. They assume it will always be there. They test it. They stretch it. They disrespect it. And because you stayed longer than you should have, they believed it had no limits. The wake-up call comes only after the loss. Not when you cried, not when you explained, not when you asked to be treated better. It comes when you leave quietly, when your energy no longer reaches for them, when your absence becomes consistent. That is when they begin to notice what was actually holding their world together, the emotional regulation you provided, the stability you offered, the way your presence softened their chaos. But by then, it is too late. Awareness without accountability does not create repair. They may suddenly recognize your value, replay moments they dismissed, and feel the discomfort of losing someone who loved them without conditions. Yet recognition after loss is not the same as change. It is regret mixed with disbelief, not growth. In your life, this realization becomes a turning point. You stop wondering why you were not appreciated and start understanding that your love was never the problem. It was offered to someone who could not receive it without exploiting it. You see clearly that love should not require self-abandonment to survive. When love costs you your voice, your peace, and your sense of self, it is no longer love, it is endurance. Losing you becomes their lesson, but keeping yourself becomes yours. You learn that being pure-hearted does not mean tolerating harm. You learn that walking away is not cruelty, it is clarity. You begin to value mutuality over potential, consistency over promises, and respect over chemistry. This wake-up call may arrive too late for them, but it arrives right on time for you. You reclaim your emotional energy. You rebuild trust with yourself. You recognize that the love you gave was real, deep, and meaningful, and that it deserves a safe place to land. And as you move forward, you carry the truth that pure love is powerful, but it must be protected to remain whole ****. Your absence becomes the mirror they can't escape *** in your life. There comes a powerful shift when you realize that leaving was not the end of your influence. It was the beginning of clarity. While your presence once absorbed chaos, softened consequences, and buffered discomfort, your absence removes that protection. What remains is a mirror that cannot be distorted by excuses, arguments, or charm. Silence does what confrontation never could. When you were there, your empathy filled the gaps. You explained away their behavior, minimized your pain, and offered understanding in places where accountability was required. Your presence allowed them to avoid looking at themselves. But when you step back fully, when you stop engaging, reacting, or rescuing, the reflection becomes unavoidable. There is no one left to blame, distract, or manipulate. Absence exposes patterns. Without your emotional labor, their cycles repeat without interruption. The same conflicts, the same emptiness, the same instability surface again and again. And for the first time, there is no external anchor to absorb the impact. The mirror is not judgmental, it is honest. It shows them who they are without the benefit of your patience. In your life, this realization is liberating. You begin to understand that your worth was never tied to how much you endured. You see that your silence is not weakness, it is strength. It signals that you no longer need to prove your value or explain your boundaries. Your absence becomes a boundary that speaks clearly and consistently. They may attempt to escape the mirror by seeking replacements, distractions, or validation elsewhere, but substitutes do not carry your history, your depth, or your emotional attunement. The reflection remains incomplete and unsatisfying. That is why the loss lingers, not because of love regained, but because of truth revealed. For you, stepping away allows healing to begin. Your nervous system slowly unwinds from hypervigilance. You reclaim your sense of self, your time, your peace. You stop scanning for reactions and start responding to your own needs. The quiet becomes restorative rather than frightening. You grow steadier, clearer, more grounded. Your absence also teaches a profound lesson about power. Real power is not in confrontation, proving a point, or waiting to be understood. It is in choosing not to participate in dynamics that erode you. It is in knowing when silence protects more than words ever could. It is in trusting that walking away is sometimes the most honest response. The mirror they cannot escape is not meant to punish. It exists because truth emerges when noise is removed. Whether they face it or flee, it is no longer your responsibility. Your responsibility is to yourself. As your life moves forward, you carry the strength of that choice. You no longer define yourself by who you were to them, but by who you are becoming. Your absence is not emptiness, it is space. Space for healing, growth, and relationships that reflect you back with respect, safety, and mutual care in the end. This journey is not about waiting for someone else to finally understand what they lost. It is about you understanding what you survived, what you gave, and what you chose to protect. You were not asking for too much. You were asking the wrong person. The moment you stepped away, you did not lose love, you reclaimed it for yourself. What they face in your absence is no longer your burden to carry. Their regret, confusion, or emptiness belongs to them. Your task now is different. It is to heal without self-blame, to rebuild without rushing, and to trust yourself again. Every boundary you set was an act of courage. Every time you chose silence over explanation, you chose peace over chaos. Moving forward, let this truth anchor you. Love should feel safe, steady, and reciprocal. It should not require you to shrink, perform, or endure harm to be worthy. You are allowed to outgrow roles that cost you your well-being. You are allowed to choose relationships that meet you with respect rather than control. This ending is not loss. It is alignment. You walk ahead lighter, clearer, and stronger, carrying the wisdom earned through experience. And as you continue, remember this with certainty. You did not break anything by leaving. You simply stopped breaking yourself to keep something alive that was never truly sustaining